At 2:03 the morning, my phone buzzed against the nightstand, and I woke before I understood why, reaching through the dark like my body knew the sound was wrong. Miles never texted during overnight installs unless a customer alarm dragged him into trouble, so seeing his name should have annoyed me. Instead, my chest tightened. The screen showed one message: "Don't turn on the lights. Someone is in the backyard." For 1 second, the house stayed silent enough for denial, and then metal scraped against the downstairs lock. I sat up without breathing and typed, "Where are you?" while my thumb slipped on the glass. His reply came too fast. "Across the street. Stay upstairs. Do not let him know you are awake." It sounded like protection, and Miles knew security systems, but the calm in those words felt measured. I put one foot on the floor, then another, and the hallway outside my bedroom looked unfamiliar, as if darkness had rearranged my home. The back door rattled again, not hard enough to force it, just careful enough to tell me the person outside knew where the weak catch sat. I called 911 with the volume low, whispering my address while I stared at the stairwell and listened to gravel shift beside the house. The dispatcher told me to lock myself in the bedroom, and before I could answer, Miles texted again, "Don't go near the window. I will handle it." That was when fear changed shape, because he had not asked if I was safe, if the door had opened, or if I could see the man. I turned the bedroom lock with 2 fingers, afraid even that small click might carry through the walls. Outside, a shadow crossed the lower edge of the window, stopped near the fence, and stayed until my skin went cold. My phone lit once more with Miles's name. "Stay quiet. Brooke. Just trust me." And sirens finally rose down the street. By the time blue light touched the ceiling, I no longer knew which frightened me more, the man outside or the man who knew every move first. The sirens grew louder, then broke across the street outside, and I stayed locked in the bedroom until the dispatcher said officers were at my front door. By the time I came downstairs, 2 patrolmen were clearing the kitchen, and the back of the house smelled like cold air and wet soil. Nothing had been taken. Not my purse. Not the laptop. Not the watch Miles left beside the sink. Whoever came here had passed all of it and gone straight for the laundry door, the one most strangers never noticed. Miles arrived minutes later, breathless and pale, and pulled me against him before I knew whether I wanted to be held. "You're safe now," he murmured, but his eyes were already on the officer kneeling by the threshold. The latch had 2 fresh scratches, thin and deliberate, right where pressure would make the old catch give. When Detective Owen Briggs asked how Miles knew someone was in the yard, Miles answered without looking away. "Camera alert. Motion sensor." I was nearby, and the words came smooth enough to sound practiced. The man outside had not moved like someone guessing through a dark property. He skipped the front porch, ignored the lit driveway, and stayed along the narrow side path where the motion light never reached. Briggs asked who knew the weak spot on that door, and Miles gave a short laugh, saying half the contractors in Providence knew old houses had bad locks. I watched his thumb wake his phone, and for 1 second, the security app was not open. Police found a partial shoe print near the fence and mud under the side window, but no face. No dropped wallet. No easy answer. Miles kept repeating, "You did exactly right. Brooke, you stayed quiet," and I wanted those words to feel like love. Instead, they landed beside the screen I had seen, and the latch scratched in the only blind place behind our house. When the officers left, I stood in the kitchen with every light on and understood the stranger knew the house too well. But maybe he was not the only one. By morning, the police tape was gone, but the house still felt handled by someone else's hands. I had every light on, every curtain open, and Miles moved through the kitchen like a man trying to look useful before anyone asked him to explain anything. Around 10, He walked in with a woman I had never met. A slim brunette in a cream coat who carried a leather folder against her chest. "This is Delia Sutton," he said, keeping his voice soft. "She helps people make hard decisions about houses after things happen." Delia looked at me with the kind of practiced concern people use when they already know the room's weakness. "I am so sorry you went through that, Brooke," she murmured, and her eyes moved from the scratched laundry door to the hallway rug as if she had studied the layout before stepping inside. Miles said she knew temporary housing. Short-term listings, private buyers, anything that might help me get some air. I had not said I wanted to leave, but Delia nodded, like the decision was already forming somewhere inside me. She set her folder on my counter and told me that after a break-in, some women felt safer making a clean move before the fear settled into the walls. The sentence was gentle, almost kind, but the word move landed too early. Before insurance, before repairs, before Detective Briggs had even called back. I watched Miles refill his coffee without asking where the mugs were, and then I watched Delia reach for the same cabinet before stopping herself halfway. That tiny pause did more damage than anything she had said. I asked how she knew Miles, and he answered before she could. "Work contacts. Providence is small. You know how it is." Delia smiled, but it did not reach her eyes, and when she turned toward the back door, I saw dry, reddish mud caught in the groove of her heel. The same color had been pressed into the mat outside the laundry door, the place the man had tested in the dark. She handed me her card and said, "Whenever you are ready to stop feeling trapped here, call me." And I held it between two fingers while Miles watched my face too carefully. I did not tell Miles about Delia's heel, or the cabinet she almost opened, or the way her card felt dirty in my hand. By noon, he had gone back to work, still wearing the face of a man worried about me, and I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open and my coffee untouched. The missing footage from the side yard kept bothering me because the man had walked through the only stretch our system failed to catch. I called the camera company and kept my voice steady, asking if the sensor had glitched during the night the police came. The support agent put me on hold long enough for the silence in the house to start pressing against my ears. When she came back, her voice had changed into that careful customer service tone people use before saying something they know will matter. "The camera did not fail," she explained. "The laundry door sensor had been disabled manually for several minutes by an administrator account." I asked whose account, and she read Miles's old work email like she was reading weather, while I stared at the same door he had stood beside that morning. I thanked her, hung up, and sent the activity log to my email before my hands could start shaking. A few minutes later, Marin Fox from across the street knocked softly and held out a small container of muffins like an apology she did not owe me. I almost told her I was fine, but she looked past my shoulder at the laundry door and lowered her voice. "My doorbell camera caught a car out front that night," she said, "and I do not want to make things worse. But I do not think you should be guessing alone." We watched the clip together at my kitchen table, with her phone between us, the timestamp sitting in the corner like a quiet witness. Miles's car rolled into view before the alert he claimed had sent him across the street, then stayed parked with its lights off long enough to make my stomach turn cold. Marin touched my wrist and said, "I am not accusing anybody. Brooke, I am just showing you what it recorded." I nodded because for the first time since that text woke me. The fear had edges, and every edge pointed back toward the man who kept telling me to trust him. The second night, I stopped pretending the house would feel normal if I kept every room bright. I changed the code on the front lock, dragged a blanket to the living room, and kept my phone beside my thigh with Detective Briggs's number already open. Miles had called twice, but I let both calls go unanswered because the activity log sat in my inbox like a loaded thing. If he wanted to sound worried, he could leave it on voicemail. A little after midnight, the side yard alert pulsed across my screen, and this time I did not text Miles first. I called Briggs, then 911, and stood back from the laundry door with my own phone recording in my hand. Outside, a shape moved past the narrow glass, slow enough to be seen, careful enough not to give me a face. Something slid under the door and stopped against the mat with a soft paper scrape that made my stomach turn harder than a knock would have. The police reached the house before I touched it, and Briggs unfolded the paper with gloved hands while I stood near the counter, barefoot and cold. The note said, "You should leave before it gets worse." But the words were not what made Briggs go still. The back of the sheet carried a faint service logo from the same camera company Miles managed, the kind used for old work orders and equipment checks. Briggs looked at the paper, then at the disabled sensor report I had already forwarded, and his face changed without needing to explain it. Miles arrived 20 minutes later, angry under the worry, asking why I had not called him before the police. I watched rainwater drip from his jacket while he stood in the same kitchen where he had told me to trust him. "You are supposed to call me when something happens, Brooke." And I answered before fear could soften me. "The police are supposed to know first. Miles, you can hear about it after." His jaw tightened, and that small movement told me the order mattered to him more than my safety did. By morning, Briggs had a store receipt, a street camera still, and a name from the company's old technician list. Travis Bell had bought gloves, tape, and energy drinks near the house with his own card. He was not a ghost, not a mastermind, just a man, paid to scare me badly enough to run. I asked Delia Sutton to meet me at a coffee shop near Wayland Square, not because I trusted her, but because public tables make liars choose smaller movements. She arrived in the same cream coat, hair neat, voice warm, and ordered tea like we were two women discussing paint colors, instead of the reason my house no longer felt like mine. I told her I was thinking about leaving for a while, and she leaned in too quickly. "That may be the healthiest thing you can do, Brooke, because some places keep the fear in the walls." I had never told Delia I felt fear in the walls. I had said those exact words once, to Miles, while standing beside the laundry door after Briggs left with the note. My phone sat face down beside my cup, already recording, because Rhode Island only needed one person in the conversation to consent. Delia opened her folder and slid a card toward me for a private buyer who could move fast if I wanted the house handled quietly. Quietly was the word that made my fingers curl around the paper cup. I asked what would happen if I did not sell, and Delia gave me a look, dressed up as sympathy. "Then you stay in a place that already proved it can hurt you," she said, "and Miles stays trapped in the cleanup with you." She caught herself after his name, but not fast enough. I let the silence sit between us until she filled it with another mistake, saying Miles deserved a start that was not built around panic and old damage. There it was. Not comfort, not concern, but a future she had already placed herself inside. I asked if Miles had told her we were struggling, and she smoothed her napkin with 2 fingers before answering. "He just wants peace. And honestly, I think you do too." I stood without raising my voice, left money under my cup, and told her, "Thank you. I think you just helped me understand where the problem is." Her face tightened for half a second, the same tiny pause from my kitchen cabinet, and I walked out with her buyer's card, her recorded words, and the first clean proof that she had not come to help me heal. I agreed to meet Miles at the house because witnesses nearby felt safer than another private conversation. Detective Briggs waited down the block. Marin knew when I walked inside, and my phone was recording in my coat pocket. Miles came in carrying a folder, wearing the tired face he used whenever he wanted forgiveness before facts. He set the papers on the kitchen table beside the laundry door he had told me not to approach. He spoke softly, saying I had been through too much and the house was keeping fear alive. The first page showed a private buyer connected to Delia's staging company, with an offer low enough to feel like pressure. Miles slid the folder closer and called it the cleanest way out. No public mess. No repairs. No more nights waiting for alerts. I looked at him and asked, Miles, do you want me safe? Or do you want me to sign? His mouth opened, then closed, and the silence answered before he did. I laid down the camera activity log. Marin's doorbell still, Travis's note, and Delia's buyer card. Miles stared at the stack like the pages had turned against him. He tried one quiet laugh and said fear makes patterns out of accidents. Brooke. But his eyes stayed on the disabled sensor report. I did not raise my voice because the papers already had weight. Briggs knocked once and stepped inside before Miles could reach for the folder, asking why his administrator account shut off my laundry door sensor the night someone tested that lock. Miles snapped that this was ridiculous. But he looked at me. Not scared for me. Just angry someone else had heard the story first. That was when he lost the right to tell people what happened. Later, Briggs called and said Travis Bell had been picked up near an old equipment unit. Travis had talked, and Miles had told him it was only supposed to scare me out before the sale papers appeared. I stood in my kitchen with the first text open and understood it had never been a warning. It was the first line of a trap he thought I would thank him for surviving. Travis took the plea first. Because men paid to create fear usually become honest when fear finally finds them. Miles lost his job before the week ended. Then his license access. Then the clean reputation he had used like a uniform. Delia's company cut ties after Briggs confirmed her buyer card. Her calls. And the quiet little plan to make my house look like damage waiting to be sold. None of it felt dramatic when it happened. Just paperwork, phone calls, doors closing, and people suddenly speaking carefully because the evidence was no longer mine alone. I stayed in the house long enough to make one decision that belonged only to me. I changed the locks, replaced the whole security system, and invited Marin over for dinner on a night when the kitchen finally smelled like garlic instead of panic. She looked at the laundry door and asked if I was sure I wanted to stay. And I told her, not forever. Just long enough to leave without being chased. That was the first time I heard myself sound steady again. Weeks later, I opened the old message from Miles. The one that began with, "Don't turn on the lights." I used to think it saved me. Then I learned it was the first sentence of the trap he built around my fear. I saved it in the case folder, set the phone beside my new keys, and let the room stay quiet without begging it to feel safe. The house did not need Miles inside it to protect me, and neither did I. If this story stayed with you, subscribe and tell me where you're watching from tonight. Sometimes peace does not come back all at once. Sometimes it starts with one locked door, one honest witness, and one woman finally believing what her own eyes have been trying to tell her.